All right, I am going to go ahead and get us started here. Welcome, everybody. I'm Michelle Parker. I'm the VP of Legislation for District PTA. We've got several board members who are on the call today. I'll scroll through the list so that you know. We've got Melissa Mountain, Nancy Boopham, Albert Coe. I know we had Sally Blumenfeld is on here. Ronald Rittinger, Sharon Olson. So we've got a few people on, so as questions come up later during the hour, we'll hopefully be able to give you lots of answers to your questions. Okay, so just a quick introduction. So we've decided as a district PTA that we've been hearing a lot of questions from all of you and wanted to provide a way for everybody to connect with each other and get you some answers to the issues that everybody's facing. And so we're going to be doing these meetings for just an hour every Wednesday night at 7:30. And we've got the next few lined up, and I'll be sending out an email about that probably tomorrow, either tomorrow or Friday, so you'll know what the rest of them are. And I'll make some announcements about that later. And this is a good idea. Just before I keep doing the introductions, if you'll see, let me show you where, if you all are not familiar with how Zoom works, probably many of you are, but some of you probably aren't. If you look at the bottom of your Zoom screen, there's a chat button and there's a chat box that shows up on the side. And so you can add questions that you have throughout the meeting over here. And Nancy Boopham just made a suggestion that you can add your school name to your name by going to the three dots in the upper right of your image. If you see yourself on the screen, you can click on the three dots and rename yourself, and you could add which school you're from. That might help people know next to your name where you're coming from, so we can all start to recognize each other's faces and not just each other's names. So let me just go over a few housekeeping things before we get started. So we're recording this meeting so that people who weren't able to attend can still get the information later. We'll send the link out for that. You can see on your screen, you should see a little record button so you know that that's happening. The presentation is going to be by Melissa, and it's going to be fairly short, just giving you an overview of how things are adjusted and sort of what the protocols are now that we're having school closures for the rest of the school year. And there's a lot of questions she's received that she'll start to address. And then after that, we'll do Q&A. And so I just explained to you how to use the chat box. Anytime questions come up, just put them there. If Melissa doesn't see them, I will be managing logistics and make sure they get put forward. And then I also want to explain to you how to raise your hand in Zoom if you don't know. So if you look at the bottom of your screen, there's a participant icon at the bottom. If you click on it, you'll have a participant list show up on the right-hand part of your screen. And you will have the option to, there's little icons that show you that you can raise your hand. And so if you do that, I will see that you have your hand raised, and we'll kind of keep track of the order of people so that when we get to Q&A, we can make sure we can catch questions. Let's see, what else do I have? I have you all on mute for now. Just so that we don't have background noise interrupting and making it hard for anybody to hear. But when we get to your question, you can unmute yourself and ask the question, and then and I'll keep track of time throughout this thing. And then when the presentation, sorry, let's see, we'll go through all those questions. Then when the meeting is over, I'll give you guys about 5 or 10 minutes heads up that we're almost finished with the hour. And then when it is over, we'll unmute everybody. So if anybody wants to hang around and ask a few more questions or just chit chat, we'll just keep the meeting open for another 10 or 15 minutes for any informal chat and do a couple of announcements. And those are the basics. Are there any questions before we get started?
Okay.
Right,
Thank you, Michelle, and thanks everyone for joining. I know you've all sent in a lot of questions, so I feel great that we can do this for a lot of the schools here that maybe didn't realize how to contact me about hosting teleconference meetings. So I am going to try sharing my screen here, which I haven't done before. Is it working? No, let's see. Michelle, can you share my screen for me as a host?
I can. Do you not see the share screen at the bottom?
I do, but then it's doing something else. Let's see.
Okay, I can pull up your document. I'm not seeing it. Hold on one second.
Oh, here, I think maybe that's it. Is everyone seeing that? Michelle, can you see my shared screen?
Yeah, I can see it.
Okay. Well, some of the goals about having conferences are to stay connected. I think you've all felt some of the effects of just being isolated and how important it's been to either have one, maybe you've already had a virtual PTA meeting, or maybe you've just been participating in some happy hours on Fridays or any day of the week. But so staying connected is really important. And then the PTA units still have a lot of business still to do at the end of the school year, including elections, which we're going to talk about more. So by having allowed for teleconferences for association meetings, we're now able to finish carrying out our business. And as you all know, PTA is founded on advocacy. And so via all these teleconferencing meetings, we can now share with our units more information about things about the pandemic. And we're actually, these Wednesdays at 7:30, there are going to be some future state legislators in a couple weeks that will be here to answer questions about advocacy that you can share with your units. So some of you, as I know, and I've participated in a couple of your PTA unit meetings, some of the best things to do are to establish some certain ground rules and best practices. So one thing that I just shared some of our ground rules that we do here at 2nd District when we're doing teleconference meetings, and that's to begin with sharing out your documents in advance. That might be your meeting minutes or typically your financial reports. So people can get familiar with those and have their questions ready. It helps everyone to be organized. So you can send those out in advance. Just like we ask of most meetings, if you can at all possible to arrive early so that you can figure out some of those tech issues. Like I could have practiced sharing my screen, which I didn't, but that would have been helpful. And then the CAPTA, I did hear them say that video is preferred, and I think that has to do a lot with just that you can feel more connected with a name to a face. But the telephone works as well for different teleconferencing, telephone conference issues. It's just that sometimes only your phone number will show up, and so then we don't know who you are. So it's good practice to announce who you are. And if you are speaking up through the telephone, you might just say, oh, this is Melissa piping in again, just so they know who's talking. I'm really big on the mute thing because when you've got a lot of people, it can be really distracting if people don't put themselves on mute. And a lot of platforms like Zoom, you are able as a host to mute everybody and allow other people to unmute when they need to speak. And as Michelle mentioned, and as we're probably using right now, but I'm not watching it right now, the chat function is really helpful for just keeping pace in the meeting and not having too many interruptions, and having a co-host like between Michelle and myself, that really helps out too. I wanted to point out some things about just inclusivity. One issue with doing teleconferencing, and one reason why I think that CAPTA perhaps didn't allow teleconferencing for association meetings, is that not everyone always has that technology, and it's a digital divide. So you want to do as many things as you can to help with inclusivity and people participating in your meetings. One thing is, if you're recording, you definitely want to announce that you're recording it. And I did hear them recommend that if anyone does speak up that they're not comfortable with being recorded, that you think about perhaps not recording, just so that they can still participate. And that was a great tip that Nancy brought up, like you can add something to your name, not just your name, Melissa Mountain, but I tried to add 2D Parliamentarian there. If you use pronouns in your email, you might put your pronouns in your name. So I've got, and these notes here, I will share out with people. I'll ask Sharon maybe to post it, our communications person to post it on the website for us. So don't worry about taking too many notes here. So those are just some general things about inclusivity, and we can talk a little bit more about translation as well. So I'm going to go over some of the most commonly asked questions, and then we can talk. I won't go over, you can see here some voting and elections. I'll just let you guys ask your specific questions for that. But I just wanted to let everyone know that this is new for a lot of people. Some people, have been doing this for years, doing teleconferencing with their work, but a lot of people coming to your PTA meeting might be the first time that they've ever zoomed into a call. And so a lot of people just don't even know where to begin as leaders of your unit. And so there are a lot of resources that are out there. One, I will post this in the chat when I'm done presenting here, but there is a CAPTA hosted a webinar that had some very basic, it was great, listed out the different types of platforms besides Zoom, exactly how to sign up for them, and also listed out some best practices. So I will share that link with you all. If you haven't checked out this page yet, this has a lot of information and probably answers a lot of questions. It's on capta.org. And if you are using Zoom or other platforms, there's a lot of help sections out there. And I just recommend practicing. So before doing perhaps a meeting with your association, try testing it out with some of your board members. It can be confusing, which one is the best for me to use, which one's the best for our unit to use in terms of how to connect virtually. And that same resource that I will share in the chat, that COVID-19 resources page on capta.org, lists several of those. Again, it's not really, no one is endorsed by the PTA, but there's a lot of options out there. And there's also a nice link that you can use to kind of compare the pros and cons or what some features are offered. You've probably all heard in the news about the Zoom bombing. So just like checking in here, we tried to have a link that was private with a password. Of course, don't share your passwords on social media or very publicly. That will help keep people from just unwanted guests or doing inappropriate things on your Zoom calls. And this link here, BuzzFeed News, had some great, just more details about the different types of security, so you can check that out. It is important, just like with your regular PTA meetings, to make sure that you do have a quorum, even when you're meeting by teleconference. So you want to make sure to take a roll call for that. It helps out with videos so you can see people's names and check their name on the membership list. And again, if you're using the telephone, they may have to just probably call in. So I had some basic questions about voting and then specifically elections. But basically the capta.org did start allowing this as of March 20th. So if you had a meeting via teleconference on March 20th, it was legit, and it goes through the end of the fiscal year on June 30th. And you hold your meeting just like you would in person pretty much. Proxy voting, I know that's been kind of confusing for people. Proxy voting just means that someone else would be voting for you, and that's still not allowed. You still need to be present, which is defined really as being able to be heard and to hear everyone at the same time. So that's why people do need to be present, whether it's in person or on the telephone or in a video. And so let's just open it up to, I'm gonna stop sharing my screen here and maybe start checking out the chats, or Michelle, if anyone had specific questions that have been coming in. If you want to let me know, we can start answering questions.
Yeah, I don't see any hands raised yet. And I just posted a couple of the resources that you mentioned in the chat box.
But anything in particular that you wanted me to do? Or?
Well, let's see if any of you have questions, just either throw them in the chat or raise your hand and I'll catch you. And in the meantime, there were some questions that came in ahead of time that I am just going to pull up in front of me. Okay, and there's a question here in the chat box. Should you use your personal Zoom account or do we have access to an SFUSD account?
You can find this information on that capta.org resources for leaders about COVID-19, that there is a link on there. If you are a K-12 school, Zoom has a free account that can go beyond what you may have heard as a 40-minute limit. But you do need to have a school email. So some schools do have, for example, at Sherman.org, and I believe they're able to set up for the free and limit no limit account. But otherwise, it's okay to use your private Zoom. You do need to have a more advanced, like a paid account to go beyond the 40 minutes. I think that's still true.
Right, it's the, you can use Zoom for unlimited one-on-one meetings. So if you need to work with somebody, you know, one person on your board or whatever, you can use the free accounts or unlimited one-on-one, but it's a 40-minute limit for 2 or more in a meeting for the free accounts. Up to, I think, 100 people, if I remember correctly. If I remember, I think Ron might remember too, because he and I were both talking about that. But if you can use one from your school if you'd like to have PTA meetings that way, or if you want to budget it in your PTA for the next couple of months, because you can always just have just a 2-month membership. You just pay by the month. So if you want to spend $15 a month as a PTA to have your own PTA account, you might want to also consider that. It looks like there are some comments in here. TechSoup is offering discounted Zoom Pro accounts for 1 year. That's great. And then Melissa, there's a couple of questions here on officer elections. Do you see those? How do we conduct officer elections, and can we vote a new board in the new school year when school is open again?
Okay, so let me just give kind of a general on the officer elections. Officer elections can absolutely happen over teleconference. And when I use that word, I mean either video or telephone or both. They are pretty much the same. You still have the same requirements where you should be submitting your slate, announcing your slate of nominees 30 days in advance. But you can have a meeting, and just you can check this out in your bylaws, but I believe that's the same throughout all the bylaws, is that you have to have 10 days notice to have any type of meeting. So I know a lot of you have already put out your slate, even though you didn't know what date your meeting was. As long as you announce who those nominees were 30 days in advance, and you've announced your meeting at least 10 days in advance for a regular meeting, that's okay. And it conducts the same way. In most cases with PTA, a lot of the votes are pretty one-sided. It's all ayes or all nays. And with a lot of times it's just one person per nominated role. And so if that's the case, you absolutely don't need to do a ballot. And so it can just be a voice vote. And I will also share that if you have a lot of people just calling for a voice vote, all the ayes, you can just have people kind of wave or give a thumbs up. You don't have to actually unmute everyone and say aye to do your voice vote. It does become more complicated if you know in advance that there is more than one person running for the same position. If you can at all request of people when you're posting the slate or posting information about your agenda to let you know if they plan to run from the floor, meaning to announce themselves at the meeting itself, because then you can prepare in advance to do a sort of ballot election. So again, on capta.org, they've offered different ideas for how to do a ballot election over teleconference. They even provide you with a Google form that perhaps people would fill out a form. It all needs to be within the meeting so that it's all at the same time. You can't use email and collect it over several days or over a 24-hour period. It needs to be like during the meeting. So some preparation time is required if there's going to be a ballot vote.
I just wanted to throw out there also, if you happen to be using Zoom, in the section where we explained where the participants are listed, if you go there, there are little icons underneath. You can do polling there, like do yes or no, or thumbs up or thumbs down. So you could have people vote that way if you don't want to have, because it's so hard to do by voice. But there are those sort of polling options in your participant box in Zoom.
And then I realized someone was asking, can you request from SFUSD to get an sfusd.edu email? I'm not sure that you can do that. I'm not sure if anyone else knows the answer.
I don't know the answer to that. I don't know if anybody else does, throw your answer in the chat, but it may be.
Maybe a teacher representative could
right.
sign up for that Zoom account that's on your board.
Right. Melissa, why don't there are a few questions related to elections that came in ahead of time. And so why don't I just read those off so that we can address those too. There is a question, I'll put in a couple that you can answer at the same time. What happens if no one is nominated for president? And there was a related one. What happens if there is no one to fill any of the officer positions that are terming out?
Okay. So first of all, whether we're in teleconference situation or not, there are minimum 3 officers required for your unit to stay in good standing, and that's to have a president, a treasurer, and a secretary. The others that might be in your bylaws are okay to remain open. If you don't have, for example, a president or any of those, one of those 3 officers, you go ahead with your election and the position remains open, and you can read this in your bylaws. But once the election is over, in order to fill any open position, it's appointed by the board, and the board actually has an election so it's the board that decides, not the membership, after that point in time. So a lot of times things do stay open even until the start of a school year. And sometimes maybe new parents can come in and fill those positions. So it's okay to leave, some positions open. President is a tough one. Unfortunately, you can't go past the 2 if you've served 2 terms, because they really want to have turnover and not have it controlled by the same people. But you just have to do your best to try to fill at least those 3 minimum positions.
There is a question here too. Is there a minimum number of people needed to attend a virtual meeting to conduct the election? That's just our quorum, right?
Can you say that again? I started reading something in the chat.
Yeah, is there a minimum amount of people needed to attend the virtual meeting to conduct the election?
Oh yeah, it's the same as your quorum that is identified in your bylaws.
And fall elections, what's the question, the answer to that, Melissa?
What do you mean about fall?
If people wanted to delay to the fall, you said you were just talking about having the board take over. And so is that the answer? It was just finishing up that question about, can we push the elections to the fall?
No, you really should have the elections before the end of the fiscal year, which is June 30th for most. Some bylaws do have a different one. And if you're not sure about yours or can't find your bylaws because they're somewhere else and you're at home, we might have a digital copy of that. I also can't access our files, but I can help check on that. But you really should try to have your elections by the end of, before June 30th.
And because we are already in the end of April, 30 days notice is right now. And so if, how can units handle that? And is there any flexibility there?
Yeah, if you don't have a slate to put out and it's blank anyway, you can just announce that you will have an election meeting at the end of May, and then all of the nominations can come from the floor, which means that people will just announce. And if you do know in advance, you can put that out, but officially that is, how it gives people enough time to think about who's running for the 30 days, gives people enough time to think about if they want to run as well, or to see that there's an open position. But you can just not submit a slate. You can say all the positions are open, and then people can be nominated from the floor at the election meeting.
Melissa, I was thinking it might be helpful to explain why the timing is what it is. Like, what's the chain of events that happens with the district and the state PTA? If people don't do their elections by May, then what? And, why does it have to be done then? Why, and if you can get it in by June, or if you don't and you start September and you don't have your 3 key officers of president, treasurer, and secretary, then what happens? What kind of chain of events does that cause? Maybe you could talk about that. That would be helpful. People who don't know.
I know that it actually starts with, a lot of you have asked, why does usually in your bylaws, the election meeting needs to happen by the 2nd week, no later than the 2nd week in April, I believe it is. I could be wrong about that, but the reason that they have a cutoff date, which some of us are beyond now because of the pandemic situation, but the reason there's a cutoff date is so that the new officers that are coming in can participate in the planning for the next year, as well as participate in the convention, which unfortunately also has been canceled because we can't have a state convention. And so a lot of changeover and budgets happen at the fiscal year on June 30th. And so it's really important to have the transition officers so that the new officers can learn from the previous officers. But this is such, a different time and unique time. And Michelle, if you don't agree with me or if anyone doesn't, but I mean, you just do your best, right? Like not even everyone can have a teleconference meeting. The priority is to have your health and safety of your families. And, you know, if this is all just too stressful, then you just don't, you know, you don't do it, and you'll get a notice that you're not in compliance and that your unit is needs to catch up with these things, and we'll keep, you know, helping you all. And so, you know, you just do your best.
I would echo that, and I don't know if Albert wants to join in on that, but it really is like there's ideal situations, you know, absent a pandemic, you know, and then there's ideal situations within the pandemic, you know, so you're trying to get all this in before the end of the school year, and if you don't, just keep doing your best. You can try to call a meeting, you know, virtually in June if you can't get it done until then, or if you end up starting the year and it's not in place, you just do your best to get it done. There are dates, I don't remember what the dates are in the fall, if anybody wants to join in on when they actually starts to trigger some official kind of legal things. But for the most part, just do the best that you can.
Yeah, I believe it's October 15th you start hearing from us about things.
Yeah, just to chime in, things aren't ideal, and the rules are in place to help guide you. And we're not the PTA police. We're not going to go around citing you if you don't follow or you mess something up. We're here to help you. So extraordinary circumstances call for extraordinary measures. Like in this situation, we have to be flexible. And a lot of times over school years, there's issues with, you know, there's relationship issues, there's school issues, things do come up, and we can't cookbook for it, and there's no one size fits all, but we're here to guide you. And my first election as PTA president was kind of like that 12 years ago, that we had to go up until the middle of June to finish our elections. It wasn't ideal, but given the circumstances, we had to do the best that we could under the circumstances. So nothing is ever wrong, and we're always here to help.
Thank you. And I have, there's another comment here in the box that I'll just read. Can voting be anonymous? I've heard of another PTA in California using Election Buddy as it allowed for anonymous voting once people were verified as paid members. Also, we were not able to get our nominating committee approved by the general PTA since COVID hit, and we couldn't have official meetings or votes. Is this okay?
So the first part of the question I caught was that can voting be anonymous? And it absolutely can. Actually, for any motion, if someone wants to call for a ballot vote so that votes are private and anonymous, that's allowed for anything. It's not just reserved for the election. And so that's just, it does take a little bit of planning. I'm not familiar with that one platform that was referenced there, but you can use whatever works as long as the anonymous voting happens during the meeting. What was the second part of the question?
They said, we were not able to get our nominating committee approved by the general PTA because COVID hit, and we couldn't have official meetings or votes. Is that okay?
I mean, it happens even without the pandemic, just like Albert was saying, and that happens. And so you just pull together, you know, if there's a group of you that you miss the non-com time, it's okay. You just try to work with who you can recruit. And if you have someone to put on a slate with 30 days notice, that's fine. And if not, you can just still hold your elections when you can.
Great. Are there, before, there are some other topics that were submitted ahead of time. Are there any other elections questions before we move on from the elections topic? Anybody can just speak up or put a comment here in the chat box. Okay, I am not seeing anything. We'll come back to it if something else comes up. Let's see. I have a question here. I have actually some finance questions here. Melissa, is there anything else on your document that you want to go over before we move away from like meeting?
No, but if anyone else thinks of something about voting or elections, I'll start monitoring the chat box as well more, and then we can get back to that one. But And I will try to post all that information for you, make that public, and I think we can probably email all the participants.
Okay, there is one question here.
Okay.
Is can two people share the presidency?
Oh, love that question.
Yeah,
Yeah,
we hear that a lot.
PTA does not allow for any officers, so there's no co-officers, no co-presidents or co-treasurers. However, a lot of bylaws have, and you can add this in, an executive vice president or a vice president that is simply the assistant to the president. So effectively, you can have co-presidents, but somebody does need to be named as the president and someone as the other role, and that happens with the treasurer. A lot of reasons, that's why a lot of people do have a second financial officer, financial secretary. They kind of share those responsibilities, but you can't technically both be called co-president.
Great. And then there's a question here. Separate topic. Are there any plans to reschedule the state PTA conference, and will there be virtual training held through 2nd District for new officers? Do you have answers there? I don't believe that there's plans to reschedule the state PTA conference. I think that that's really, really complicated to do. And I know that we are having training for 2nd District officers. And Ron, do you want to jump in and talk about that? You're on here, right?
Yes. Hello, everyone. This is Ron Rittinger. I'm the 2nd District Auditor. Excuse me. And we are planning to have a training in this format later in May. We may do a series of meetings over specific topics to keep the meetings concise. So we'll be sending out more information about that as we get closer to it.
Great. Thank you. Let's see, there's some more questions in here. I know that people are feeling overwhelmed. We hear you. Let's see. We have a general meeting scheduled for April 30th, but what do we do if attendance is too low for a quorum? Do you want to take that, Melissa?
Yeah, I was just kind of trying to answer that a little bit in the chat box
Oh,
there.
okay.
I've found that some units are actually finding an increase in attendance. If it's a unit that finds like a lot of people don't have access or the technology, then that might be not the situation. But a lot of times they've been surprised that there's actually been people that have never attended a PTA meeting, but this makes it very accessible for them. So you might be surprised about your quorum.
Yeah, I think a few of us were talking about, we're noticing that that's sort of a dynamic, which is interesting. But of course, you can still have a meeting. It's just voting is the challenging part, but you can still share information and connect with people. Let's see. Can we continue our position more than 2 years given the current situation? We have a hard time finding a new treasurer.
Yeah, and that question gets asked inside and outside of pandemic, and the answer that you'll see with CAPTA is that they really do limit it to the two consecutive 1-year terms because they want to see the changeover in the leadership. It's great if the people can stay on in a different role or in an appointed role that's created for them, if that's, if they really want to stay and can add to it, but it doesn't allow for a third consecutive term.
Mm-hmm. Let's see, other questions here. And I know I'm just reading off everybody's questions as I'm seeing them pop up, but if I'm reading your question, you'd like to actually have a little bit of back and forth on it to get clarification, please feel free to unmute yourself and jump in. But I'm just reading through these, and we'll just keep doing that unless.
I see this one here. Are we able to add this to our bylaws? So about teleconferencing. And so before this, all boards were allowed to add this to their bylaws if they hadn't already, and association meetings were not. And I don't know what discussion will happen in the higher levels. Maybe they will start adding this, but currently association meetings after June 30th will not be allowed to conduct official meetings via teleconference.
And there's some other follow-up question or comments related to that. So if we don't have a quorum, we just need to keep trying at future meetings in May and then again in the new school year for votes, action votes.
I think that that would be the best idea, just to, well, first of all, it goes along with the nonprofit rules and the PTA rules, and just, you know, nobody will be able to question that as long as you have your quorum. But again, like you said, you can still conduct your meetings and share out the information about it, but you should really have a quorum in order to move on.
Mm-hmm. Another question here, is the bylaw update process still the same or has it migrated to Google Docs?
We're able to do it a little quicker. We're able to do it via email now. So you can still continue to keep updating your bylaws and reach out to me if you need any assistance with that.
Great. Okay. I don't see new questions there, so I'm going to go back to the list of ones that were submitted ahead of time. And there are a couple of questions related to money. So Sally, you might be needed here, but we'll see any of our board members can jump in. There's a question here. I don't know if Rebecca Blondin from Webster is on. Asked a question about fundraising for a current year versus fundraising for a future year. Does any of our board member, if Rebecca, if you're on and want to add any color to that question, then please feel free. Otherwise, does anybody on our board want to jump in and address that? Sally or anybody else?
Hi, this is Rebecca. Can you hear me?
Yes, we can hear you.
Okay, so the PTAs are always planning for the year ahead when they are doing their fundraising. But considering the fact that many people's fundraisers spring fundraisers may have been canceled and whatnot, and there's going to be a huge budget shortfall for the upcoming school year, are we allowed to fundraise during the 2021 school year for the 2021 school year, or all those funds have to be for the next school year? Does that make sense?
I'm not sure what you're actually asking, but you know, because we are on a cash basis, whatever fundraising you're doing, whatever money comes in during that school year is accounted for during that school year. So are you talking about expenses or prepping for the following year?
I think maybe you and I should have a longer conversation another time.
Sure.
I saw the question. It went back to a teleconference. So about if you get back to your in-person meetings, once we're able to not just stay in place, can you have people call in and just not vote? That's up to your group, I believe. If you want to allow for people to dial in virtually, but they would not be able to, according to the rules after June 30th, they would not be able to participate in voting.
But if they were to do that now, oh, they won't be able to have meetings in person now anyway. Never mind. That's next year. Okay, next question here. Again, Sally, do budgets still need to be net zero or can we submit deficit budgets?
I think you can submit deficit budgets as long as there's enough cash to, of course, you know, take care of that. You know, I think a lot of it depends on how much starting cash you have too. Maybe, you know, some units have built up some cash that they really want to spend down. Then that year you'll probably will have a deficit budget.
And Albert has a comment here about moving your reserves to your operating budget.
Yeah, getting to that question about setting up your budgets, you're going to have up and down years, and that's why, as a rule of thumb, we maintain a reserve budget of half the amount of your operating budget. So when you get into a year when your fundraising is dip for some reason, as in this year, dip into your reserves and then start using next year to start building that up again. You know, bring it all the way down. You're going to have up and you're going to have down. Use your reserve as your buffer. Does that make sense? Get it?
Great. There's another question submitted ahead of time that said, with school sites now inaccessible, how can PTAs pay for things that need to be paid for? What's the best way to receive money?
The way to receive money or to pay bills?
I would guess that it's both, but I don't know. I don't notice. Is Patrick on the call? If he is, you can call. You can add a little bit of information. I think you are on here, Patrick. If you want to jump in.
Oh, is he?
It does look like he's on from New Traditions.
Otherwise, I know some other units might be able to answer how they have been doing it.
Well, I think deposits are fairly simple, unless you can't access the school to pick up your mail, right? Is that what? As we're kind of running into that issue too.
I know some units have shared their, not publicly, but they'll say, contact me for the address, and then they'll share their home address to mail checks to if it's a fundraising thing to collect the checks.
Yeah. The only thing I can think of is to try to reach out to somebody at the school site to see if you can make arrangements to, you know, stop by and pick up mail. Otherwise, I think it's kind of on a individual site basis. But for writing checks, though, I know, you know, we require 2 signatures on each check, which becomes kind of an issue. So there's a lot of delayed payments. And most vendors, I think, are okay with working with you guys on getting the checks in late. But the way that most of us would do it is to just sign it and then mail it over to the next signer and have them sign it and then mail it on. Some banks allow for electronic payments, like you could set up an ePay account, and it would be best if you could set it up with an approval process. Because I know with my bank at work, we can do that. Like I'll load up the electronic payments and someone else has to go in and approve it. So some of the banks have that technology available. So you might be able to make some e-payments that way.
I'm wondering, Albert, is this something that you can flag for folks at the district about just a question about the mail delivery? If people are expecting to see checks that may have been sent before all this happened or anything people are waiting for, just some expectation of how the district is planning on handling mail, even though school sites are closed. If they have thought about that yet, they may not have gotten to thinking about that yet, but maybe that's something that you can add to your list with
Michelle?
Yeah, Shelley.
Shelley, no. All the campuses are shut down, totally closed. All the mail is stopped.
Right.
It's in wherever the U.S. Postal Service holds our mail over the summer, which is not in your local post office. If you didn't redirect your mail as soon as you could in March, you're out of luck. We at Alamo know of checks that are somewhere in the ether. So not much you could do.
All right.
It has to do with the sanitizing of the campuses.
Yeah, no, I agree. Yeah, all of the school sites are closed. I just didn't know if the district had a different protocol that they were trying to deal with, because I imagine there are some sites that had some necessary mail they needed, and so I didn't know if they had a plan worked out at the district level, aside from sites.
And as far as I know, our mailman seemed to have been informed through the mail office, post office chain of command, that the schools were, because we were in for a few days in early April, I guess the week of the 6th, and he wasn't delivering because they'd already been instructed.
Okay. Great, thank you for that. All right, next question here related to finances. Looking ahead to Teacher Appreciation Week, if approved by the membership, can we purchase online gift cards to send to our school's staff school email address?
I actually don't think that we're supposed to be giving gift cards to teachers at all, because it's a tax type of thing too, because it works as an income to them. So we've technically usually just did teachers appreciation, like a luncheon or even some token gift at the luncheon as an appreciation gift. But gift cards are like giving them cash.
Teachers have to report a gift card from their PTA as income?
Technically, yes.
Oh, a comment here. I thought cash-like gifts were against union rules. That I do not know.
Yeah, I think we technically should stay away from any kind of cash gifts, and gift cards are cash gifts.
So a lot of schools have done things for teachers, but just had room parents organize it, and it's completely and clearly stated that it's outside of the PTA.
Right, but there is an official, I don't know if I have it on this laptop, board policy from 1978, if you want to invoke it, which says no district staff member may receive a gift from anyone. But that's what they're talking about.
Okay, we have another question about elections. Melissa, if you're the leader of the virtual meeting and you are on the slate, how do you recuse yourself during the discussion and voting?
They're on capta.org. There are very specific directions and even scripts for how to run your election. And so the president, say, was being elected for a second consecutive term, they still chair and the parliament, or the parliamentarian, like they're still chairing the meeting, so you don't have to really recuse yourself necessarily.
Okay. Do you have, is that a good enough answer, Wendy, or do you have something else further related to that?
It's the same whether it was a virtual meeting or in person.
All right, cool. All right, that looks like that was good. I don't have any other pre-submitted questions. Does anybody else have any other questions you want to chime in with, either in the chat box or just unmuting yourself? Related to any of these meetings you have coming up the rest of the school year, do you feel like you know how to run elections, how you're going to handle any kind of voting, voting that you have to do related to finances, anything? Do you feel confident in knowing how that works? If you don't, chime in, happy to answer that. And if not, we'll move on. There's a question here that is not related to managing PTA business, but I would imagine that there are still people who have this question also that we can move on to if there are no more questions about business. Will you share the Zoom information after the meeting to establish our teleconference meetings? Meaning, Jessica, you want us to share our protocol for Zoom meetings? Is that what you're looking for? Yeah, we can send the links that that Melissa was sharing from the state PTA, and then also we're developing our own protocol for how we're running these meetings, and it's similar to some of the things that that Melissa shared at the beginning of the meeting, and I'm happy to share that also with everybody, so you don't have to reinvent the wheel. We can all sort of use best practices from each other for making sure that a meeting can be run efficiently and safely. So we're happy to share those. We can send them out through the President listserv afterwards.
And Jessica, if you have any questions, you just want to reach out to me, email me directly, or set up a time to chat, we can do that too.
Okay, and then a couple other things here. So there was a question about how people are handling graduation, and then Joe put some ideas. ideas in there. So we can add that in. And actually, before we move on to that topic, actually, because we'd be happy to move over that way. I just want to answer this question: where can we access the recording and chat transcript to share with board members who couldn't make this? There will be a link in the cloud that I think actually all participants will automatically get emailed to them when this meeting is over. And if not, I will, well, regardless if it is shared with you, I will share the link through the president listservs and treasurer, because I know it went out to both financial officers and presidents, and so I'll send it out so that you can share that with people who'd like to listen. So we'll do that. And then maybe also before we move on to the graduation talk, I just wanted to quickly announce next week, and we'll just keep this dialogue right now open for another 10 minutes or so we can talk about graduation or anything else anybody wants. Next Wednesday night at 7:30, we are going to have some of the budget staff from SFUSD participate. We have Deputy Superintendent Myung Lee, the Chief Financial Officer, Megan Wallace, and then also Anne Marie Gordon, who is the, oh, what's her title? She's like a budget director. I can't remember her exact title with the district. All three of them are going to be on and doing a short presentation about SFUSD's budget for the rest of this year and looking into next year, and just answer questions for you. So I will be sending out a link for registration for that. And so if you have questions you want to submit related to your own school, related to the district as a whole, please go ahead and submit those ahead of time, and I'll share them with those folks so that they can be prepared to answer your questions. So that's what's coming up next, just to let you know that. And so we can move over to the graduation question. What are people doing for graduation? And I'm not sure that our board members may have the answer to that, but if anybody else wants to chime in and talk about how you are handling graduation at your school, then please chime in. It's there's probably all this silence because nobody knows what they're going to do. It's it's a big question. I know that schools are trying to figure this out. My kids are at Lowell. I have a senior, and I know our school hasn't figured out how to do that. They're trying to figure out ways to make this special. So I don't have an answer for that, and I don't know if anybody else does. Joe, you have your hand raised. Do you want to unmute yourself? Do you want to talk?
Yeah, cool. Hey, everybody.
Hey.
So we did a Film in the Fog like thing at Washington High School on the football field last year, I guess, or I don't even remember when it was. It was a great event. It was cold and it was nighttime, and it's all a large inflatable screen. We showed Crazy Rich Asians. That was a good thing. So that company is Funflix. That, by the way, in itself is a very reasonably priced fundraiser event, or just community event. We did it as community. But Funflix sent me that link that you'll see about drive-in graduation. So essentially they're setting up a drive-in theater and including a FM broadcast for the audio. So people come, they stay in their cars, but you can put together videos and somehow do the graduation ceremony as a drive-in. Obviously, we'd need some room, and maybe Lowell's a place for that. And, you know, maybe it's set up at Lowell and many people can use it or something like that. That's it.
Interesting.
We're pondering the idea.
Yeah, that's interesting. I don't know that anybody really would want to take this on, but I did see a fun article the other day about these college students. Which schools were they? Boston College and somewhere else, where a bunch of the students created their entire college in Minecraft and did a virtual graduation. We're planning a virtual graduation in Minecraft, which that was an interesting idea. All right. Is anybody else have questions about, or have any ideas about graduation before we? Sorry, we don't have other ideas for you, but as ideas come through, let's share them on the listserv.
Yeah, thank you.
Yeah, sure. Let's see. I'm going to just read through some of these out loud, so if people aren't monitoring the chats, and we've got people on the phone too, so I'll make sure that we get this. these covered and read out loud. So while we discussed gift cards are not technically allowed for teachers, we do have annual appreciation lunches for teachers. Due to the school closure, can we consider buying them lunch by sending them Uber Eats or other restaurant gift cards? I know it's contradicting, but we really do want to show our appreciation to teachers. Is that something that they could do?
I just
Sally?
posted something on the chat. So what you could do is pay the restaurant directly for a meal. So a lot of the restaurants will offer some kind of fixed price type menu for pickup or delivery. So if you set it up so that you pay the restaurant directly for the meal to be delivered, I guess that would kind of work as an Uber Eats. Like if you pay Uber Eats directly to have just stay away from the gift card type thing. So if you could just set up a big delivery to all the teacher group.
I think you also want to be careful about making it equal, because that's an issue that you can't use PTA funds to, unfortunately, you can't use it to support one family or one teacher. It needs to be offered to everyone.
Yeah, it might get kind of difficult because then you have to collect everybody's home address to get the delivery done, unless you could work out something with a particular restaurant, and do something like, you know, you would for each of the teachers, and you can give them a list. They're allowed to order, you know, a $25 meal, and then they can deliver it to them. Then they can just, the teachers can call in and give them the address directly, and then you guys and the PTA can pay for the meal through the restaurant. Does that make sense?
Great, thank you. Yeah, that's a good idea. Oh, that's a good idea too. Possibly support our parents who own restaurants. That's a nice idea too. Yeah. So let's see, there was a question in here which was sort of answered also. There was a question about how the district is handling grades this semester. The second district is not formally advocating for any of the positions, but yes, that is true. They are considering grades, and Shelley responded they are going to be voting next Tuesday at the general board meeting. And if you haven't, I don't know if you all attend board meetings, they've moved them into the afternoons. The last few meetings have been starting at around 3 in the afternoon. And if you go on the district's website, you'll see the information on how to log in if you'd like to follow that along. And they have not made decisions yet. I do know that they are, they have legal counsel checking to see what is allowable through the State Department of Education. And there are questions about what UCs and CSUs will accept. If anybody's interested, I'm happy to share a link to the State Department of Ed website that talks, the webpage that talks about grades, and you are welcome to send your own opinions to the school board members if you have them around that, but that decision has not been made yet. And there was some, I think, strong opinion by the board last week to move to giving all students all A's. I just don't know that that's legally viable, and they're looking into some of that. So it's not a done deal yet. Let's see, what else do we have here? Martha, is this about the Yahoo group on soda talking about ideas? Is that about graduation?
Yes.
Okay.
And it's a lot of ideas. I kind of stopped reading them because it's a lot.
Okay. If there's any good ones, share them with the president's group.
My daughter just wants to get her cap and gown and go take pictures. And prom, dress up in prom clothes.
Yeah.
And take pictures.
Yeah, it's a hard time for our seniors. All right, I'm going to skim through because we are at 8:33, and so anybody who needs to jump off, we just want to say thank you so much for coming on the call and for participating. We hope you get your questions answered. Please feel free to stay on for another few minutes. We'll keep this going for another 10 minutes or so. There's a few more comments that I'll just read out loud, and I can or everybody can unmute themselves. I can unmute you all if you like, and we can just have a little bit more informal dialogue if that's helpful.
I also want to welcome people to give us feedback after this, because we plan to host these every Wednesday until the end of the school year. And that's another best practice that you can add to your own unit. You know, it's not really over when the meeting is over, and you can invite feedback and try to improve as we go along.
Mm-hmm. Exactly. And we also sent out a link if you have ideas for these. They're not completely scheduled yet. So if you have ideas of what you'd like us to cover on these Wednesday nights, then just fill out that Google survey form that I sent out a few days ago. All right, let's see. There's an announcement here from Nancy about safe routes to school. Nancy, do you want to actually say that out loud, or do you want me just to read your?
Here, I'll just say it. I used to work for Safe Routes to School, and there's no bike and roll to school week because people are not going to school. And so there's a contest that they're just offering, a contest for students to make posters. And if kids want to do something that is around transportation, they can make a poster and turn it in. And I put the link in the chat. And that's all that is that Safe Routes to School is encouraging people to think about transportation, and if their kids are interested and disappointed that they can't bike or scooter to school this year, that there's this poster contest. So it's in the chat, the link. I'll also put it in PTA Presidents tomorrow, the Google group.
That is great. And deadline is the 30th, she said. Okay, let's see. Oh, that's very nice. Everybody's saying thank you. Are there any other questions anybody has, or you feel free to unmute yourself if you have anything else you want to add or ask as we're winding up our night. I can tell you what we have slated for the next couple of weeks. I know I announced the budget conversation next week, but the following week we're planning on having it be more of a grab bag. So we'll be soliciting topics you all want to talk about, and then having a conversation, probably timing like 10 or 15 minutes per topic of things that you all are thinking of, either for this year or next year for planning, whatever it is. It'll be a bit of a grab bag. There's a functionality in Zoom also to have breakout rooms, and so we might explore moving into breakout rooms if we want to divide up like elementary school officers and members, and high school and middle school, you know, whatever we want to do. But we'd love to, we'll be asking for your input on topics to cover then. And then the following week, we're going to have State Senator Scott Wiener and Assembly members Phil Ting and David Chu. All three will be joining us. And whatever is in the moment of conversation is what they'll be talking about. There may be some updates to the state budget, although they're not expecting a new budget until they'll be approving basically this year's budget again in June, and then in August is probably when they'll be doing a new budget once the taxes all come in July. They can talk about resources that are available for families during COVID, who are impacted by COVID and school closures. There are so many things they can talk about, but they will all three be part of our conversation in a few weeks. And those are the ones we have planned for sure so far. We have a couple of other topics that we will likely do after that in the next couple of weeks, but we still are interested in making sure we're meeting your needs. So let us know what will be interesting. Thanks, Joe. All right, let's see. PTSA, Paula, you're the PTSA secretary. Yeah, we'd love to have you looped in. We don't have a secretary's listserv. And so what I would recommend is that all presidents forward these invites to at least to your boards, if not to your entire membership, because some of these meetings, they're all open to anybody who wants to be part of them in your PTAs. So feel free to share them far and wide if people are looking for this kind of information also in your schools. So, so Paula, ask your president to, oh great, that's how you got looped in. So just have them forward to your board so that you can learn about these and participate. Anything else? All right.
It was good to see you.
Thank you for coming. All right. All right, we'll see you all hopefully next week.
Thank you.
Bye.
Bye.
Oh, thank you.